Welcome to This Sustainable Life, the premier community on learning to live sustainably. Are you trying to live sustainably? Me too. Enjoy the process? Me too. To hear heads of government, business, culture, sports, and everywhere also doing it, changing government and corporations. I've been on my journey of environmental sustainability for years. My guests and I have learned and share on sustainable food, sustainable farming, sustainable travel, and more. This podcast shares my results, often opinionated, and world-class guests I lead on how to be more sustainable. You're about to hear an episode originally recorded audio only. You'll hear the original podcast name, Leadership in the Environment, because I focus a lot on leadership. Subscribe, upvote, share, and tell everyone about it. We're growing fast. Now here's the episode.
So much of the stuff that I teach is how can we as human beings do a better job at interacting with each other? And how can we as human beings do a better job at allowing ourselves to step forward into who we are and who we might become? I've been mulling that over, and there are things we do, my wife and I, in part because of just sort of the choices we've made that, we can kind of put up on the little trophy list of good environmental action. So like we live downtown Toronto and we don't have children, so we've never had to have a car. We don't eat a whole lot of meat, although we do occasionally. We do the recycling and all that sort of good stuff. I do fly a lot, so that's against it. And we support things like the Nature Conservancy group that buy up land to preserve them. But what was interesting was when you posed that question, even in absentia, I was like, I wonder what the drivers for me are around trying to do that. And I think part of it is a sense of commitment to the commons. They talk about the tragedy of the commons being the shared land.
Hi, this is Joshua Spodek, and this is Leadership in the Environment. You're not the only one who cares about your impact enough to act. You're part of a global community undeterred by people saying, if others don't change first, then what I do doesn't matter, and other excuses. We've read the science. We can do this. This show is about personal responsibility, acting, and improving your life by your values. As guest after guest says, the challenge was hard, but thank you for getting me to do it. I wish I'd done it earlier. Listen on for leaders to inspire you, hear their struggles, and then act. Go to joshuaspodek.com/podcast to commit to a public, personal challenge of your own. You're not alone, and you don't have to wait for others. I really enjoyed interviewing Michael for this podcast. First of all, as a coach myself, his book, The Coaching Habit, has nearly 1,000 reviews on Amazon. Basically 5 stars. It's the standard in the field. He's also a Rhodes Scholar, but very approachable, very fun to talk to. He's a senior partner at Box of Crayons, which teaches people how to manage better, how to lead and coach. You'll hear that we ended up interviewing each other, putting the other one first, learning about how the other one operates. And so we talked a lot about how to lead and motivate without using authority based on people's existing motivations. So when he talks to me, you'll hear some behind the scenes of how I get people to share what they care about and connect that to their personal challenge on this podcast. So you see that behind the scenes part. There's also a lot of systems thinking, which I think is essential for thinking about and working with the environment. So there's a lot to listen to here. I think you'll like it a lot. So let's take it away. Hey, how are you doing?
Joshua, I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good.
Excellent.
It's been a little while. I was trying to remember, when did we last speak? Was it a month or two ago?
I think it might have been longer than that, actually. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 months.
So I hope you're doing well.
I am. I'm doing well.
As if without me, it can't be going well.
Well, thanks for asking. No, things are good. I'm right in the middle of a road trip. So I've just been away for 10 days. I've got 2 days back here, and then I'm off for another 15 days. So it's a flurry of kind of unpacking and repacking going on.
I hope that's exciting and not too much of a burden as travel can be so often.
It's almost entirely exciting, and it is yet still a bit of a burden, like sleeping in unfamiliar beds and being on planes and all that sort of stuff. The thrill of that has somewhat gone, yeah. But I'm going to some interesting places, so I'm up for it. Cool.
When you travel, so you say interesting places. I thought you were going to say to some interesting groups to talk to, and I hope that you get the chance, because I imagine you do a lot of hotel, conference room, restaurant. Do you get stuck in that too?
Yeah, for sure. That's part of the deal. But then you hope the group is, the right group for you. They like what you've got to say. They respond to it in the right way.
Yeah. part of the glamour of being a writer, speaker, public person. Yeah.
Yeah, glamour may be overstating it a bit, but yeah, yeah, exactly. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Actually, I just got off the phone with a professor at USC who is using my book as the book for his class. And
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like a very, very pleasant surprise. And so it's kind of neat he was asking me these questions that were like, how does this work? How does that work? And I was like, oh yeah, that was a real problem. And I had to work through how to make that work. And here's what I do. It's like, oh, I'm going to do that.
Nice.
Really very, what's the word? It's flattering. Yes. It's, what's the word? It feels good. It's definitely a good feeling.
Yeah. It's that feeling that your work's making a difference in the world.
Yeah.
Whatever the snappy phrase for that is, it's that.
Yeah. All those hours with my butt and shoulders hurting from sitting at the keyboard and being like, oh, what am I trying to say here?
Yeah, exactly.
So I had a couple questions that I wanted to start off with, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
First, is it safe to say that you are in the business of motivating people, figuring out how to help other people motivate others as well?
Well, the business of box of crayons is narrowly defined. So we say we teach 10-minute coaching so busy managers can build better teams and get better results. So we've chosen the how to be a very specific tool. But the point of the how, the why, if you want to kind of connect to the Simon Sinek way of thinking about things, is to allow people to be more human in the work that they do, both the managers and leaders who are trying to lead teams and also the people who are being led. A previous book of mine, I talk about how do you do less good work and more great work. And so if good work is your job description, great work is the work that has more impact. In other words, it makes more of a difference, but it's also the work that has more meaning. In other words, it speaks to who you are and who you want to be. So I reckon striving to alter the balance so you've got the perfect blend of good work and great work in your life makes for better humans, which probably makes for better planets and communities and stuff like that. And I think coaching is really the tool that we've gone, yeah, let's double down on that as a way of getting there.
You're mostly talking in the context of work.
Yeah.
How much of what you do is, I guess the companies probably hire you. I would guess that this stuff, how much of it applies outside of the professional sphere?
Well, honestly, if you interact with other human beings, a bunch of the stuff that we teach and talk about is helpful. So if you happen to be a monk, a soloist monk dwelling in a cave, then I've got nothing to offer you. But, so much of the stuff that I teach is just how can we as human beings do a better job at interacting with each other? And how can we as human beings do a better job at allowing ourselves to step forward into who we are and who we might become? Certainly for us, it's, just for a sales or a marketing point, you've got to say, here's who I try and serve. But what's lovely for me is that the books that I've written have tended to be kind of cross-disciplinary, if you like. So they do. I mean, I was just yesterday at a education conference. So everybody in the room were teachers and kind of principals and assistant principals. And they were a fantastic group to work with. And I'm thrilled. But you wouldn't call that the classic corporate group by any means.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. And I'm glad to hear that you're talking about not just – it's funny. Like I asked, do you do it in a corporate environment? You gave an example that's not really a corporate environment, but also what you talked about doesn't sound exactly like how people – it sounds like, I guess, how enlightened people, more forward-thinking, are talking about how work can be – talking about how people can become more – I want to use your words, but I didn't write them down, but it's like to be more themselves, to be more a better version of themselves.
Right. I mean, when we teach that kind of difference between bad work, good work, and great work, we say, look, these definitions, even if it's take good work, we say the definition of good work in the fastest way is it's your job description. But whether you're a stay-at-home mum or a stay-at-home dad or a solopreneur or work for a huge company or something else, you kind of have a job description. This is what I'm expected to do day to day to day. And when I get it done, I avert the immediate crises. And so the tools we teach, which are like, what do I care about? What makes a difference? Where do I want to focus? How do I be courageous enough to actually start the stuff that scares me but I think really matters? How am I resilient enough to keep pursuing it when things get difficult or confusing? All of that is, separate from context. You can apply that anywhere.
I'm glad you're saying this, because the reason I'm getting at outside the work environment and outside the traditional places of where people think of one person coaching or influencing another is in the area of the environment.
Right.
What's been motivating me is that there's a lot of people who are, I think that they think that they're leading when they're doing things like telling other people what to do or trying to pass laws where, the United States is not exactly backing. I mean, people say a lot about polluting less and emitting less, but they're not actually doing very much of it. And if they vote by what they do, there's not a lot of backing for a lot of this stuff that people are trying to, it's a lot of like, you change, but not me.
Yeah.
And
the NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. And it's true, it's always curious for me that, in our schools, particularly our primary schools, at least in the places I've lived, you get this sense of kids being fired up about the world they live in. There's they go and pick up litter. They kind of draw pictures of the earth. There's that sense of we've got to look after Mother Earth. But it's tough when you get into being an adult and you feel like a very small piece in a large system. And part of what that large system is called capitalism. And so that kind of economic imperative keeps driving us forward. And it's much harder to stay committed to that sense of environmental commitment.
Ironically, the people who call themselves leaders find themselves shying away from leading, because if you're going to do what goes against what the system is, I mean, you can be crazy, but sometimes it's also you're a leader. And if people aren't doing something yet and you're going to be the first one to do it, that's leading. And, I don't want to get into definitions of leadership.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, think about what Al Gore did with his documentary. And then he did, I think, what is it, last year or in the last 6 months or so, he's done a follow-up from that.
Yeah.
And that caused such a big splash when it happened, kind of literally, I guess, and metaphorically, with that kind of polar bear swimming in the ocean. And yet now that whole sense of an inconvenient truth has lost its urgency and failed. Or take a Naomi Klein, who's, written about similar stuff, and how her message, those that want to hear it loud and clear, but those that don't want to hear it just manage to shut that out. I mean, you thought about this longer than me, Joshua. Why you look at think of an Al Gore, because, he's a high profile leader. What do you think stopped him having the impact we were kind of hoping that he might have? Because my perception is that it slipped away a little bit. I don't know if that's the same for you.
Yeah, I'll answer that, although I have to say it's like the flip version of the exact question I was going to ask you. I was going to say, what works? And, I kind of want to ask you, you wrote a book on malaria that I think there's got to be a lot of overlap. And I suspect that you took a lot of what works in coaching and leadership and apply that to an area where people weren't really doing it. And I mean, that's what I did. And so, okay, to answer your question about Al Gore, there are a few things that I think got in his way. One is that whether he likes it or not, a lot of people view him as a political figure. And so he's going to get all this stuff, all this baggage caught up with it. And so some people are simply going to disagree with him because it's a different party. Some people are going to disagree with him because they see where it's going to go, and their profitability is going to drop a lot. And whether he's right or not, that's going to be an issue. Those things I think are tragic and might be difficult for him to get away from. Just, he was in the White House for 8 years. What was it? 8 years?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Anyway, he's in the White House for a long time.
Yeah, 8 years.
And then there's some other things that are different also. He takes a fair amount of heat for still producing a lot of greenhouse emissions. And that's going to...
Right. He has a big house.
If you're going to fly around all over the world, that's going to happen. Now, a lot of people who support him will say that's part of the job and there's no other way to do it. And so, yes, you don't want to fly that much, but this job requires it. But that opens, everyone else in the world can say, well, I also agree that I shouldn't, but this particular thing that I'm doing does require it. I mean, when my dad goes to visit my sister, I say, it's a lot of pollution. He's like, yeah, well, it's my daughter and that's the way it's going to be.
Right.
And I remember reading someone writing like, look, I eat meat. That's the way it is. I like steak. If the planet has to suffer for it, that's the way it's going to be. So getting around that is going to be really difficult. And I think he took a very fact-based approach and he made an emotional appeal. But I think that spreading facts and science, while essential, does not motivate people's behavior. The example I always give is like, we have more knowledge about nutrition and diabetes and diseases of excess than ever.
Yeah.
And people with the knowledge,
and we're all fat,
it doesn't make Ben & Jerry's any less delicious. And, you want the Ben & Jerry's. And so you rationalize why it's okay. And now you got this reason that it's actually okay to eat Ben & Jerry's. I'm not saying everyone works this way, but I've certainly watched my mind do this. It's like, I say, I'm going to go exercise tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and I'm like, oh, you know what? I have this thing and it's actually okay if I don't exercise today. And the next day I'm like, what was I thinking? But the logic makes sense. And then if someone pushes against it and then you push back, it tends to reinforce the counter. It reinforces a belief that's actually not what you believe,
right,
or not what you want to.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff that says being argued with tends to reinforce your position rather than shift your position.
Yeah.
So it's a conundrum. I mean, this is a hard topic to take on, which is like, okay, so fact-based stuff, that doesn't always work because people go, it's fake news, or I don't agree, or I found one scientist on 100 that thinks global warming is not true, so I'm just going to quote them. Arguing from a fact-based position often just entrances people's positions, because if they've decided the planet is flat or fine or whatever, it's very hard to get them to shift from that.
Yeah, and when I first started doing this, that is taking on a leadership in the environment role, it was like, the way I always describe it is like walking through a minefield of people's emotions. And not only do they entrench in their positions, but their pushback becomes intensely emotional. If you want to get someone really angry, talk to them about not flying.
Right.
And how flying pollutes. And they'll start giving you all this stuff about how the plane was going to fly anyway. And there's going to be solar planes one day and all this stuff that I've just come to say is just fatuous and specious. But when they want to fly, it holds weight in your mind. And then if you push on it, they get really angry. Now, I don't push on it because I don't need people. My goal is not to get people angry at me. That's not productive. But I had to go through this minefield and like try this, try that before to try different things that would work. So that's where the podcast came to be. Is I realized working with groups, I hadn't yet gotten enough experience to handle the different perspectives of a diverse set of people. You can't just look at someone and understand what their perspective is on it. And working one-on-one with people, I started seeing that people, when they would change their behavior, they make a little difference of maybe they're picking up some garbage or eating less meat. But that wasn't the big effect. The big effect was that they would, once they actually did the change that they liked, they would start finding bigger things themselves. And so that's why, the format of the podcast is the way that it is that it seemed to work on a small scale, and maybe it'll scale up to millions or billions of people.
Yeah, that would be a fine thing. So I know part of what you do is you ask the guests challenges to take on. I'm curious, and I know I'm kind of changing the topic here by interviewing you, but you've thought about this more than I have. And just enough reading to know that there, that Pareto principle about 20% of what you do makes 80% of the difference. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, when you think about the challenges that your guests take on, or maybe the challenges that you personally taken on, which ones do you kind of hold up as going, this is probably having the biggest impact? Because when you don't do this, that not only does this happen, but this also happens and this also happens. I'm wondering if you've got a sense of which challenges have the most kind of systemic impact.
What I found is that it's not the challenge, but it's the relation between the person's challenge and their values. Because I'll tell you one of the things that I do, and we'll do this in a second, is that I ask the person to pick their own challenge based on their values. And because if I don't know their values, then if I say, here's something you could do that will lower your carbon emissions, but they really care about pollution or litter, then it's not going to resonate with them. Whereas if it's something that they do themselves, when it works, then when I have the second conversation with them, it's all about how they improve their life. Now that could be through not eating meat or not getting bags at the store or take public transportation or something like that. But it's in their minds, it's self-improvement or whatever their thing was. Maybe it's a relationship with their father that got them to think about streams when they were a kid.
Right.
So if sometimes I have a conversation with someone and I don't really pick up on, I don't do an effective job of getting why the environment means something to them. And if that's the case, then they're not going to have as strong an attachment to the task, the challenge is not going to be as meaningful for them. Every now and then I'll have someone who just can't think of a project. And if they ask me enough times, can you think of one? Then I'll give them one, but often those don't work as well.
So I like where you're going with that whole piece around what are your values and how do you go from something you actually care about to turn it into an action or a new habit or a new way of trying to show up in the world. How do you connect people to their values? I mean, how do you help me figure out what I care about in the first place so that I could then go, well, then now when you put it like that, not eating meat is the right thing to do?
Well, actually, part of my research when I prepare for things is to find out something about the person, see if there's something in their public persona that reveals something about them. So in your case, often I generally ask the person, I say something like, this is leadership in the environment, and we've been talking about leadership for a while. Let's talk about the environment. And I'll ask them, what's a passion about the environment for you? Like, what do you care about? And I can ask you, you saw the overview of the podcast.
I did, yeah.
And so you know that there's a challenge coming up, which is, at your option. You don't have to do it. So you didn't have to, but you're on. So I imagine there's something in the environment for you. What do you think about when you think about the environment? What do you care about with respect to the environment?
I've been mulling that over, and, there are things we do, my wife and I, in part because of just sort of the choices we've made that, we can kind of put up on the little trophy list of good environmental action. So we live downtown Toronto and we don't have children, so we've never had to have a car. We don't eat a whole lot of meat, although we do occasionally eat meat, but mostly we don't. We do the recycling and all that sort of good stuff. I do fly a lot, so that's against it. And we support, we donate to things like the Nature Conservancy group they buy up land to preserve them. But, what was interesting was when you kind of posed that question, even in absentia, I was like, I wonder what the drivers for me are around trying to do that. And I think part of it is just that a sense of commitment to the commons. They talk about the tragedy of the commons, the commons being the shared land, and a community would have an agreement about, okay, so it's the shared land, so everybody can graze 2 sheep per day on the land. But then somebody goes, well, I'm going to just graze 4 because I want to. And then somebody else goes, well, if they're grazing 4, I'm going to graze 4. And then everybody else goes, well, damn it, I may as well get my whole flock on there. And then everybody's like, well, I'm going to put my flock on there as well. And before you know it, the commons, all the grass is gone, it turns into desert, and now it becomes a resource nobody can use. So I think, it feels to me that maybe the thing that's at the root of some of the stuff that we do is around trying not to be part of the tragedy of the commons, where you go, well, I don't know, who cares about the larger group? I'm just going to get what I want because I want it. And I think that's what I'm trying to self-manage around.
Okay, so I'll kind of narrate what I'm doing as I'm doing it. You mostly, except at the very end, you mostly talked about what you did as opposed to the reasons behind it. And at the end, you started, like you say, you talked about your eating habits, your flying habits, your where you donate and things like that. But that doesn't say why you do it; it just says that you do it. And you said you don't want to be part of the tragedy of the commons, but still, there's okay. So what? What if you were, or what's better for you about not being a part of that game?
Yeah, and part of starting around with what do I do at the moment is going, well, let's assume that what I do at the moment point to some values of mine. And part of the reason me doing that is just trying to figure out with you kind of on the air as we speak, well, what does drive me to do those things? Because I'm not entirely sure. I don't have a clear articulation or a clear understanding about why it is that I would care about the tragedy of the commons. I don't know if it's just that's it in and of itself, or just something about my upbringing. I don't mean to be a kind of elusive, annoying interviewee here, Joshua, but I'm struggling a little bit to figure out what's the core driver or the core value for me around some of that.
On the contrary, there are several conversations that have gone like this, and I think it's immensely valuable there are going to be some people listening who also feel the same way. They're like, yeah, I do want to do this, but I don't see what the difference is. Like maybe my life would be better if I bought a Hummer and just drove around and did whatever I want. But I do kind of feel like there's something there. And sometimes it takes another person asking the questions to see what you don't see yourself. But if you don't make that connection, then anyone suggesting that you change your behavior without a motivation behind it,
right,
there's no meaning or purpose to it.
Right.
So I don't know. What do you think about when you think about, what's the difference between a world in which everyone's out for themselves versus a world in which people think of others? Is it an economic issue? Is it an empathy issue?
I think it's about that kind of thin veneer of civilization and how quickly that can get stripped away. What did I read? This is a kind of gruesome metaphor around how if your island is infected by rats, what you do is you don't set out to poison them. This is a really gruesome metaphor. So, not suitable for work if you're listening to it. It's like you collect all the rats and you throw them all into the same barrel together. And then effectively what happens is the rats start eating each other. And finally you're left with kind of two rats facing off against each other. And any other rats that show up either get eaten or, and it just turns into a self-management piece where you're like, okay, it's kind of this mutually assured destruction thing going on. And it just doesn't take much for that to come out. You look at Trump and what's his name in North Korea at the moment, kind of posturing over nuclear missiles and how quickly that just escalates. And everybody else is like sitting here vaguely terrified about what's going to happen with that. And it feels to me that honoring the commons is one of the ways to go, this is how we stay in relationship with each other.
Is it a fear of that, or is it you don't want to go there, or you do want to go to someplace else? Is it anxiety, or maybe it's passion for the alternative?
Yeah, I think it's, there's two ways of reacting to a core value. You either move towards it or you move away from its opposite. I think it's probably moving away from, it's my attempt to do what I can to move us away from stripping away that, and I love the phrase, that thin veneer of civilization. That's I'm kind of seeking to avoid that, rather than necessarily being all about the commitment to relationship. As I think about it, those kind of apocalyptic movies around, okay, it's Mad Max, it's whatever, it's all gone to hell. I find those quite depressing and scary.
Feeling inspired? Do you like hearing others acting, that you're not alone? Go to joshuaspodek.com/podcast to hear other interviews, but even more valuable, join the growing community of people who care enough to act, not just talk. Read the list of people who have taken on personal challenges and then commit to one yourself. Don't be surprised if you end up loving it, changing more, and finding people following you without you even trying. That's what happens when you improve your life by living by your values. Okay, so at this point in the conversation, a lot of people will talk about, like one person might talk about how much he likes to take on challenges. So that I ask him to take on a challenge with respect to the environment part is not as important. He just likes the challenges. As it were, I kind of have faith in a situation like that, and this is borne out, that when they do take on the challenges in the environment, it's not just that they learn about themselves and develop discipline or whatever, but they also pick up new things about their world, about the environment, and they start caring more. Sometimes people will talk about, there's a lot of family connections, things with their parents, going camping, right, or outdoorsy things when they were younger. And in that case, it's going to be a much more family-oriented thing. So we'll still be talking about emotions and what people care about, but the connections may be very different. And which is not to say that they might not also have a system. I hear you, and I keep thinking like a systems perspective, because I think of the tragedy of the commons as like a systems type thing. That's where I learned about the term from. Others might see it as economic or other. But that's the one that comes out in whatever comes out in the conversation. I work with that. If I had many conversations with them, other things might come out. And then I ask them, so I'll do it with you and tell me how it feels when I do it with you, is if the issue for you is avoiding the thin veneer of civilization from disappearing or protecting it, then I invite you at your option. You don't have to do it, but if you want to take on a challenge that would affect that, maybe protect it more strongly or keep it there or something that would help reinforce it. And now I have to say a couple things to make sure that people don't misunderstand. So it doesn't have to solve everything overnight, because a lot of people have this feeling like if it doesn't,
that's a relief.
Yeah. A lot of people have this reaction of like, well, if this other industry doesn't change, what I do doesn't matter. Okay. This is just a personal challenge. It's not trying to save the world right now. Then it has to be something that you yourself do. So no telling other people. You can't say, here's my challenge. I'm going to get someone else to change, but not me. And
well, that's disappointing, because that would have been much easier.
That's what a lot of people are doing. And that's, in my view, that's a lot of what's gotten us into this mess. Is like, everyone's like, well, right, it's okay for me to do this. I mean, Al Gore did it.
So that being the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly Gandhi. It's like people with the poster up on their wall of like, Gandhi, be the change you want to be. And then they're like, well, here's what I'll do. I'll get someone else to change. I'm like, what does that mean to you? If not, anyway, then it can be temporary. It's temporary, but I hope that when you do it, if you choose to do it, that it's something you think about doing long term. So you don't just, you can do it for whatever limited time, but I hope you think about making it longer term. And I think those are the main things. And it can't be something that you're already doing.
Right.
So is there something that comes to mind of something that you could do that might be relevant to the tragedy of the commons or to this thin veneer?
You know, I want to say, and I'm embarrassed to say it, I got nothing at the moment.
That's a common thing at this stage.
I'm looking forward to the second conversation because it's a new insight for me around what's the driving motivator behind this. I haven't really had time to process it to go, well, what would I do differently as a result of a commitment to that belief and that value?
So let's work it out because we're here now. And also I've seen that usually when someone has something that they care about, there's something usually there. Oftentimes, I mean, speaking for myself, I usually am inhibited, even without realizing it, of sharing things that I care about because it makes me vulnerable. And so even if there's something there, usually it can take me a bit to get to it.
Right.
Then other things is sometimes just talking about it makes it more clear. I'm also thinking of my hopefully large listenership that there are probably a bunch of people out there who are also thinking to themselves, yeah, I don't know either. And so I think I really like when someone who is a leader and an influential person allows themselves to be seen as, I don't know, because it's really easy to look at you and be like,
oh, yeah, as a leader and an influential person, it would be perfect. But that's all right.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people look at you and they'll say like, yeah, Rhodes Scholar, of course, blah, blah, blah. It's easy, but it's not the case.
Right.
And I've had people who are like really great coaches and really great leaders, and they come on and they're like, the second time through, they're like, I was just going to get bags from the store and I would bring bags with me to the store. And I kept not doing it. And this is just something I can't do right now. And for someone who's already gone through it, it's kind of like putting on a seatbelt. I mean, when was the last time you did not put on a seatbelt?
I can't really remember. I mean, I don't drive a whole lot, but let's say it's been a long time since that hasn't been just an automatic habit.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, like when I go to the store, it's like, bring a bag. I don't think twice about it. And so for someone to say, I don't have time for it, I'm like, time? There's no time involved in this. But of course, that's, they have other priorities and things like that. And so their mind isn't there yet. And that's actually one of the biggest outcomes that I find is that people get this mindset shift is what I've been calling it. Right. Someone else made that term. And once you make that mindset shift, it's done. Like now you're thinking about like you are someone who picks up trash off the ground and puts it in a trash can. It's not something you think about. It's just like you see, you're like, oh, that shouldn't be there. I'll just put it in the trash can. Someone didn't, I will. And it's not like it's not a big time sink or anything like that. So to the thin veneer civilization is kind of an interesting thing. I haven't certainly think about the tragedy of the commons. I haven't thought so much about what to do about it. I'm kind of playing with it in my head. I presume you are too.
Yeah, I'm playing. So here's where I go with it. There's just quite a lot of information out there about the 100-mile diet and sourcing your food grown closer to you rather than the bag of spinach that's been flown all the way over from Africa or California or wherever it might be. And it feels to me that part of the one way of framing it, it's a small thing, but it could make a difference, is actually just being more conscious about where the food that my wife and I buy, where's that grown and where's that sourced, and kind of tap into that more local sense of growing rather than I don't really care the price of what it really took to get this lemon to me from wherever it's coming from. Now, the downside is, of course, we're just about to slide into autumn and fall and winter here in Toronto. And it's like, all right, so that rules out some of my summer fruit and vegetables because I'll be eating more winter-based stuff that's grown locally. But I think that could be the challenge, which is to increase the amount of 100-mile food that we buy and consume. So
now let me ask you, because you came up with that, and it's something that a lot of people are doing. I wish more people were doing it, and I suspect that over time more and more people will do it. How did it come to mind? Was it already there and like it got revealed, or did like
it kind of, I'm going to say, Joshua, it felt like it just popped. I don't know whether there's some sort of connection between literally thinking about commons and a field is like where you grow stuff, and growing stuff leads to the diet piece. It could just be the sort of subliminal connections happening through that.
Yeah, see, I think a lot of people have this stuff floating around their heads. And here, I'll give you two stories from my life. One is when I first learned of how much pollution flying caused. I was on a flight, and I was watching a guy who wrote the book, what's called Without the Hot Air. He was at Cambridge, Ian McKay or something like that. Anyway, he was talking And he said that flying New York, LA and back is roughly a year's worth of driving. And I did not want to hear that because I wanted to travel. And I also wanted to maintain the sense of I'm leaving the world a better place than I found it. And suddenly, and living in New York City, I don't have a car. And so I was like, crap, this is not helping my identity, my own self identity. And so I did what I think most people would do. And I suppressed the information. I put it in the back of my mind, farther, way off the back burner, and figured, I don't know, I'll deal with that later.
Right.
And I think most people do that. We hear all these ideas. Like the world is filled with, here's 20 tips that you can do to reduce your footprint. Here's 10 tips that you can do, blah, blah, blah. And if people aren't doing them, it's not because the tips aren't out there. It's not because the people don't hear them or they're not available. Because if you search online, you can find thousands and thousands of tips.
Yeah.
If people aren't doing it, there's something stopping them. And if they're not getting the information, it's not because the information's not out there. They don't want it.
Right. It's not once heard somebody say it's not a knowing problem, it's a doing problem.
Yeah. And also it's like an anti-knowing problem because I didn't want to know that information.
Yeah.
I think I could have looked it up any time. It kind of got in at just a moment when I happened to be open to it. And so that led me to suppress it and much later act on it. And in fact, the next time I was flying. And then I was like, I can't stop.
Right.
This conflict is eating me up inside. And I think there's a lot of people being eaten up inside by doing one thing, saying they believe one thing and actually behaving a different way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a conflict lots of us face, not just in thinking about the environment, but just in general, which is like, what do we say our values are? What do our behaviors actually reveal our behaviors to be? And what's the gap between that?
Yeah. And not just asking and dealing with the answers and then acting on it. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head of all of this without doing is interesting conversation, I guess. But then if you make your goal changing behavior, which is if you don't change behavior, the carbon dioxide levels, the pollution levels are not going to change. So if you set your goal of changing those things and all you do is talk, I think the reason not many people are taking on changing their own behavior and trying to influence others is that it's really hard. I think doing what I'm doing and trying to influence other people to actually take on responsibility and change. And I'm not trying to work with people who don't agree. If you disagree, that's your business. I'm not trying to change anyone's beliefs. But if you believe,
that's not a fight you want to have. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of people who want to change their behavior and can't see their way to it. Either they don't know what to do or they don't know how to do it, or they're afraid of people pushing back on them, or they tried and failed and don't want to try again. And that's my audience now. Maybe I'll work up to other audiences later.
Right.
And even within that audience, I'm only trying to reach the people that, like, I live in a certain world in the United States, on the East Coast, well-educated, male, lots of different things about me that's me. And I'm hoping to get along with a few, like, you are one person. I think that you're an influential person. You may act like you're not, but I think I've seen the book reviews.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of stars on there. And either you have like a lot of really good friends, or I think people you don't know are reading the book and getting a lot out of it. Books, I should say.
Right.
And so I'm trying to work with people like you so that your listeners will hear. And if they found you useful before, I think they'll find you useful again. And I hope also there are a lot of people listening thinking, hey, I like what Josh is doing, but it doesn't resonate at all with my community. I'm going to take it to my community. And so, and as leaders often say, I want to train leaders. I want to create leaders, not just followers, or leaders and followers, because some people don't want to lead.
Right. And I think that's the dance we all have, which is like, the whole leadership and follower-ship thing. We get to play both those roles. So really all the time. So in all sorts of small ways, you can be leader for a moment, and in all sorts of ongoing ways, we can all play, better followers as well.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and you called attention to you're like, I'm interviewing you back, but, and I think there's a general practice when you're interviewing is like, you shouldn't talk too much. And maybe listeners like Josh, let Michael talk.
You failed that rule, Josh. I'm sorry.
In my mind, I was letting you interview me back.
Right.
I think you have a lot of experience interviewing people.
That's true.
And so I was allowing myself to be led back. And I think that's what happened. I like that style of leadership of, it's not obvious who the leader is anymore because we understand a common goal and we're trying to get that out there. And I want people who are listening to become leaders and hear of what at least one person's path was if they're listening to this, at least they're not completely bored.
Right.
There's some value in it. And so I'm trying to share some of that. How are you feeling about this interview?
I tell you, I mean, I think it's interesting because, I like the back and forth. So it's not just you firing questions at me and me doing my best to answer, but there's that kind of mutual exploration. If I was a listener, both you and I are, I would say, in my judgment, fairly cerebral. We talk at a somewhat abstract, high level kind of way of thinking, systemically, theoretically. And I'm just wondering if it's been a bit too much of that for some of the folks. But I don't know, there's only one way I mean, this will have a different feel than some of your other interviews, perhaps. So you get to kind of throw it out there into the world and see what people think.
Yeah, I guess hopefully people will respond and write what they liked or didn't like.
Right.
I think also the second one will probably be more emotional and probably more stories.
Right.
And I hope that it's whetting people's appetites to like, okay, Michael's talking this way. Let's see how it goes. And at some point I want to make the goal a SMART goal.
Okay.
So would you be up for, as you said, like be more aware or be more, having foods local? Would you care to make it more specific?
I'm going to say no to that right now, just because I don't really know what my baseline is. So I don't know what I'm building from to improve towards. But here's what I will commit to. My SMART goal will be to articulate the change I want to see in terms of eating more 100-mile food.
So I'll push a little bit back because I want to, if possible, can we put something in that will reduce your effect in some way?
Well, I promise you what will happen is I will increase the amount of 100-mile food that I'm eating. So I'm going to have an effect. I just don't want to commit to exactly what that is in that specificity that a SMART goal demands, because I don't know what I'm moving towards yet. I don't know where I am at the moment. So I don't know what it means to what extent I can increase the 100-mile food in my life. So change is going to happen. I just can't give it to you as a SMART goal right now.
Okay. It satisfies my interest in that it's above zero.
It is. Yeah.
So that's whether it's quantified other than non-zero I'm interested to hear because I think you'll come up with that anyway.
Right.
But as long as it's something, because action as opposed to analysis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pontification. Exactly.
And how long do you think it'll take you to work it out?
Well, I'm about to go on a 3-week traveling jag. So my goal of eating 100-mile food within 100 miles of Toronto is going to be thwarted by the fact that I'm not in Toronto for the next 3 weeks. So I think what that means is by the end of October, I'll have figured something out on this.
Okay. Would you be game for scheduling the next conversation for the end of October or beginning of November? Or does it have to go through your...
This is going to have to go through my assistant because I've been forbidden from randomly putting stuff in my calendar because it just makes life miserable for everybody. So you could say end of October or early November, and we'll see what magic she can rustle up on the calendar.
Okay, so I'll follow up with her after we hang up.
That makes me sound very kind of fresh, but that's, I've got to follow the rules in the company or I get my hands slapped. Arlene's scarier than you might realize.
Okay, that's cool. So I'll contact her and see about that and schedule something for then.
Perfect.
And in any case, for the people listening, most of them are just going to get to go they'll hear the end of one and they get to start the next one right away, not even knowing how much time went in between.
Right. And in fact, what we really should do is think about doing it in kind of end of November or December, because if I'm traveling for the next 3 weeks, the end of October is not going to be long enough for me to actually have made a whole lot of traction on this. So let's give me a chance to actually make a difference.
Okay. So end of November.
Yeah. I think that's going to be the good target area.
Okay. And I like that you're already taking it on yourself to act. Like, I think that you are envisioning coming back and reporting, not just like, oh, I found out how much I ate and what the average distance was, but to act on it before we speak.
Right.
Which is one of the big things that happens is that people, once you start, it's that mindset shift is, I think, already starting to happen.
Right.
So I'll mention a couple things that I'll give you one a challenging thought. And then I'll also mention some things that come up with people. So one is that you can still do the 100-mile thing of 100 miles from where you are. And maybe wherever you are, you could tell the people.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So you may or may not want to incorporate that in, because the next thing I was going to say is that the big challenges that I see people face is not so much their own willingness, but it's two big things. Other people who push back. Sometimes it's like a crabs in the bucket sort of thing. Sometimes it's like they just want logical explanations for things and it makes it difficult.
Okay.
And the other is travel. When you're away from home, you have less control over your environment. And so people face if you're trying to avoid packaged food and you're traveling, it's really, you don't have a fridge and a place to cook. So you're kind of stuck. So that makes if you're traveling around, it makes it doubly harder because you're going to be dealing with all these people who are trying to help you. And you're like, it sucks if they're like, oh, we're taking this great restaurant and it's all imported food. And you're like, oh, I'm trying to do the opposite. You have a double whammy of being away from home and other people. On the flip side, if you're just figuring things out, you could be like a big test bed. It's like, what happens if I do this? Yeah. So I leave it to you if you want to make that part of it or not.
All right. I will experiment while I'm traveling as well.
All right, cool. So let's wrap up there. And unless if there's anything else that I didn't think to bring up that's worth bringing up.
I think we covered a bunch, and I've got my marching orders.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing how it goes because every now and then someone says something that's really new and yours is a different perspective. And so I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Me too.
Well, thanks. And then have fun traveling the next couple of weeks and experimenting with the observations.
Thank you. I'm sure I will.
And I'll talk to you again in about a month and a half.
A couple of months. Perfect.
All right, cool. Talk to you then.
All right. See you, Josh.
See ya. Bye. I'm interested to hear how Michael does this because he did something that a lot of people do when I talk to them about the environment, which is at first he's not really sure what to do. He's done some things already, but he's not really sure what to do next. But when I talk to him, it pops out that there was something, this 100-mile diet, 100-mile food term. I didn't come up with that. That was something he's already thought about. I think a lot of people, when they hear this podcast, it gives them a chance to try something that they've been thinking about for a while. So I hope if you're listening to this and you've thought about maybe there's something I could do and you're not really sure what, go through some of the questions he and I did for yourself and see if something doesn't pop out. Also, since this recording, Michael and I got to meet in person. This is kind of a cool insider thing. He was in town with Marshall Goldsmith, who held a party, and we were both there, so we met in person. So I look forward to the next time. I think it'll be an even closer connection between Michael and me. So I look forward to it and hearing how his challenge went. Did you feel inspired too? Then act. Go to joshuaspodek.com/podcast and click to commit to your personal challenge so you can inspire others. Value means better and worse, and living by your values means living better by your values. You may struggle at first, but it's the hero's journey from living by others' values to living by yours. People say that little things add up. I won't argue against it, but what I find counts is acting. Doing something, anything, starts that mindset shift from the debilitating others should act first or making excuses to the empowering I can make a difference and living by my values improves my life. I don't have to wait for others to act first. I'm looking for leaders, people who will bring what works here in this podcast to communities I haven't reached. Billions of people want to change their behavior. There's room for leadership, from personal leadership of just yourself to whatever scale you want. Start by acting and changing yourself. Go to joshuaspodek.com/podcast and commit to your personal challenge.